Hey everyone, how are we? I think it's the first time we've had two Australians on the stage together at Syntopia, so Michael, part of the history book now.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone, my name is Huey, and I am the Customer Success Team Lead for the Asia Pacific region for Zoom, based in Sydney, if you can't tell already. My role is actually to deliver happiness to our customers, driving adoption across the business. I'm actually pretty excited to be up here on stage today with Michael from NIB, another Australian as well. And we're going to talk about NIB's Zoom journey, from where they started, the process they went through, and where they are today, and how their culture has changed since deploying Zoom across the whole business. So, Michael, I guess before we start, how's Zoomtopia going for you? How's your trip so far?
Yeah, not too bad. I think the highlight for me was listening to Mike talk in the keynote this morning, and the two takeaways that is so simple was, if you do stuff up, just take that 30 seconds and don't make it worse. So I think they're the two takeaways so far today. Yesterday was a good day as well. But yeah, overall it's been really good, really enjoying it. Got a lot of key takeaways to take home tomorrow.
What's the biggest key takeaway for you so far?
Oh, the biggest one, well, it is take that 30 seconds to just revisit what you've done and don't make that problem worse, which we all do in IT because everyone thinks we can fix everything. It's probably the highlight.
Cool. How's the pet kangaroo back home?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Are there any Aussies in the audience? 1, 2, 3? So I've got a really nice pet kangaroo next to my drop there, so it's really cool.
Very nice. So obviously I'm here to talk about pet kangaroos. So I guess first of all, my first question is, tell us about NIB Group and your role at NIB.
Yeah, so NIB, so we're Australian based, and NIB is a place where we really foster innovation. From the top down, we're constantly challenged to challenge the status quo. So just because something is done one way, it doesn't mean it should be done that way, or there are other ways of doing it. We have a really good flexible work policy as well, and we really like to, enable our employees to have a good work-life balance. So it's all about the flexibility to start to drive that culture, because if you're happy at home, you come to work happy as well. So I've been with NIB now for 8 years. I've seen a lot of transformation in that time, moving from a single Australian-based health insurance company through to an international organisation. So if you Google NIB, you'll see that we're Australia's third largest private health insurer, and we're also Australia's fourth largest travel insurer and supplier of travel insurance as well. But at the end of the day, we're a place where we want people to come and work for us. Health insurance isn't always interesting. It's about what you do in the job to make it interesting for them.
Great. So let's go back 24 months ago. Tell us about the video experience at that time at NIB.
Yes, so I might just take a little bit further back actually. Here, I was thinking about this earlier. Back into when I started at NIB, our video experience was an ISDN box that sat in a cupboard that nobody ever used. And I think everyone here can resonate with that in 2010. It was about 2012, 2013 when we acquired a business in New Zealand that we then brought in video conferencing into the building. And it was a very traditional video conferencing boardroom setup. So we had a boardroom in our Newcastle office, which is 2 hours north of Sydney. And then we had a boardroom set up in our Auckland office as well. And it was very much that traditional executive, senior management type experience, and it wasn't really opened up to our end users. As we grew the business, we pushed more video conference rooms into our office locations, but only a maximum of 10 or 12 rooms and 3 across the ditch there in New Zealand. But the experience, it wasn't very simple to use. It was a very on-premise heavy kit, so we were dragging a lot of the data or the bandwidth back into our on-premise setup there. So the quality wasn't always as good as it should be. It wasn't that user-friendly. It wasn't uncommon that you could go into a meeting and it would take 10 to 15 minutes to start a meeting, or make sure that everybody could hear each other and everyone knows the "hi, can you hear me?" or "can you see me?" and you start waving. That actually became quite normal, and when that becomes normal in an organisation, it really drives a poor perception, and that user experience is just really bad. So it kind of pushed people away from using VC there. Remote Teams at NIB was only just starting, and it was more the exception than the norm.
Cool. That's great from a business point of view. What about the employee culture at that time and the perception around video?
Yeah, so when you say video conferencing, everyone relates it back to that utopian view, working at home on Skype on a communitized product. And that's what they expected in the office. But everybody knows once you put something into an enterprise, it's not always that way. So they often saw it as a challenge to use. There was really little faith in the technology as well. When we were doing meetings with externals, there was always a lead up to will it work, will it not work? And then that drove people to move back to that face-to-face and travel for these meetings because if you have a poor video experience, it reflects poorly on your brand as well. So to avoid that, they started travelling again. I mentioned that remote working was very much only new, and it was my perception that people didn't really understand what it would be like to work remotely or to work with remote teams. So it kind of drew a little bit of a void in that area as well.
What was the key driver at NIB in terms of change?
Yeah, so in 2018, or 2017, 2018, we acquired a few businesses and we ended up with 4 offices in Sydney, in New South Wales, with 4 different business segments. In Melbourne, which is in Victoria, we had 2 or 3 offices as well. And we started moving to a shared services model. So when we moved to a shared services model, there's a lot more reliant on other areas of the group. So we did an office consolidation project. So we moved 400 people in the Sydney area into one office and 200 people in the Melbourne area into one office. At that time, we decided that, let's take advantage of this. Let's look at the way we work in the organisation. So we went down the agile workforce, the office of the future. We called it Basecamp. And part of this was to really push that shared services concept there. But once again, in order for this to happen, we had to change how we did work. So that was a key driver for change, was the consolidation of all of our offices, bringing businesses together that we had acquired into central locations and started to take advantage of the shared service model.
Awesome. So Zoom was already being used at some parts of the business. What did you hope to achieve with introducing Zoom across the whole organisation?
Yeah, so Zoom was introduced to the business to solve a unique problem that we had. So we were doing a bit of business with a JV in China, and our video conferencing system just wouldn't get through the Great Firewall. And because of the distance and the latency, even when we did get a workaround for it, it didn't actually work and the quality was bad. So Zoom was introduced for that, and it solved that problem for the key members of that team. But what we started to see was people that were on that project team want to use the technology into the other areas of the business. So we started to see that good experience come through. So going back to your original question, because I like to sidetrack a little bit. So the key value propositions for us and what we wanted to achieve was really amplify our notion of anywhere computing, so that any device at any time from any location. And so regardless of whether it's your laptop or your iPhone or your Android device, that you could connect from anything. Of course, if we were going to push this and really promote this, we needed to improve our stability and operational effectiveness as well of that VC platform. And of course, once we drove that and we were able to achieve that, then we could really go and promote the external connectivity with our stakeholders. So we could then start to go and reinforce with the business that we do have a good service. You can meet with your externals, and you won't look bad, and it will be an overall experience. It will be really well. But we also wanted to take all of our employees to take up video conferencing and move away from, you need to be in a meeting room to have a video conference. We wanted to move to that particular point-to-point, device-to-device, and reflecting back on that anywhere you are. We wanted to, as a value add going down the track, look at how we could now change the way we communicate with our employees. So start to look at webinars, Q&A, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But at NIB we have a 100% cloud-first strategy, and we needed something and a video conference technology that aligned to our strategy as well. But the one key thing is that simplicity and the same user experience, no matter where you are. So at this stage now, we had offices, so we're about 1,800 employees, majority in Australia. So we have offices in Australia, New Zealand, Auckland, which is New Zealand, I guess, Cork and the United States. So with our travelling employees, or the employees that moved around a fair bit, we wanted that experience to be consistent and simple wherever you went. So there wasn't learning a new technology everywhere you went, because at the end of the day, no one's going to do that.
You mentioned Australia, and we've got an office in Sydney as well as Newcastle. Just for everyone here, how far is it from Newcastle to Sydney?
So Newcastle is where we're based. It's our head office. It's where we originated from. It's 2 hours north of Sydney. If you catch the train, you're lucky to get there in 4 hours. So it's a very short distance in terms of commute. There's a freeway between the two offices, and a lot of so Newcastle is considered a regional area, where Sydney is obviously our capital city, and a lot of our business is now done in Sydney. But we still see ourselves in Newcastle with about 400 employees in that location.
So I guess given the business's perception about video technology as well, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest challenge is that when we did this consolidation, we handed out all new laptops to people, we moved them into all new buildings, and we're going to outlift a whole new video system. Now, if you said that to any business executive, they're going to tell you that's not going to work. And that is the problem that we had to overcome. So we had to look at how we adopted that. We knew that we had one go at this, and we had to get it right. So we drew on our partners. We know that we don't know everything, so we partnered with a partner in Australia, Peace of Mind Technology, who helped us along the way, not only with the change, but with also the technology and what we did. But we needed that solution there. So, yeah.
Tell us about the process you went with.
The process,
people.
right.
Yeah.
I like to ramble, typical Aussie. So to understand what our problems were, we met with all of our users in each location. So we set up stakeholder groups and understood from them not only what their problems were and what problems they have been encountering, but in the real world, what would you like your meetings to be? How do you want to communicate with your employees, be it in the office or at home or across different locations? So we started to gather all that information, and what we found was, I call them naysayers, but people that always have a negative point of view, and they're always the loudest and the most vocalist people. So that enabled us to point them out and then change their perception. And we knew that if we could get them to change, we could bring everybody else along with the ride as well. So we spent a lot of time working with the most vocal people, to understand what their challenges were. Once we had these understandings, we brought in a lot of the technologies with our change champions, and we let them touch and feel the technology as well. And this allowed them to not only see and touch it, but make sure that it was meeting their expectations, but would work the way that they wanted it to work in their meetings. And when we did this, we obviously had our partners with us. We were able to work with them to enhance their meetings and really drive the value proposition of what we were trying to do, just to make it really simple.
So culture is all about people. Did they have an influence in terms of the office builds?
Yes. So I mentioned that we consolidated our buildings, and we took a lot of the feedback from the users and put that into how we set up our meeting rooms in the new buildings. So we, in the traditional days, we would have just had the standard 6 to 4 person meeting room, but we ended up with 4 person, 6 person, little huddle areas, interactive areas, the phone booth type situations, which when we played this back to the employees, they got the sense that they were being listened to and that they were on the journey with us. And that was really important for them to be on that journey and feel part of the decision-making process as well. So it wasn't just us telling them what they're going to get, they could see all of their ideas come to life.
Great. Just going back to the question earlier, how did you identify those naysayers as well?
Yeah, so in the business that I was working in and that I knew, probably I know who they were, but in the new businesses that we had acquired, I used my contacts and just talked to them, and you could start to really understand who they were after 1 or 2 conversations, because it's not just the tech that they were complaining about or that they had issues with. Also, through our service desk, we had a lot of requests.
Got all those tickets?
Always tickets.
Yeah. So true story, I remember when we spoke the first time, you mentioned that whenever the employees were having a meeting, wasn't a Zoom meeting at that time, but a video meeting, they would have to point a webcam to a whiteboard
Yeah.
Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I run a delivery operations or a DevOps team, a bunch of developers and operations guys, and they're really creative on their whiteboards. And in our head office, we didn't have any of the fancy technology back then. So what we saw were them holding up their webcams and their laptops to the whiteboards and people instructing them on how they should be drawing or what they wanted to do. Anyone in the hands-on tech has probably seen this before. Creative way of doing things, but it wasn't ideal. When we moved into the new office, we put in a lot of the touch screens with the touch and share, and the teams then started to collaborate using these technologies. But the guys at home that didn't have this technology, they were able to do the sharing so they could draw as well. Now, the upside to this was that because these were in open areas or our open collab spaces, other teams started to see how these teams were working, and then that moved into how they worked. So it was kind of through, I guess, natural growth that other teams started to adopt the way that our more agile type teams were working. So we're seeing a lot of that push through the business that way as well.
Yeah, great. You seen any creative annotations on those whiteboards?
Yeah, it's always funny on how you get remote teams to, I guess, stay bonding together. So you'll often see little smiley faces drawn in whiteboards, or if someone's taking too long, they'll just put a big cross over it. Just all those little team bonding things that they like to do to keep it interesting.
Of course. Do you have any rules for people using VC?
No rules. Your standard HR type rules always apply, but we never publish rules saying, you must VC here or you must VC there. We do publish guidelines for our employees, and they're very simple guidelines, like don't go and book a 20 meeting room to have a VC on a one-on-one somewhere else. Go to a smaller room, use your laptop. When we look at, we don't mandate that you turn your camera on when you're in a VC, when you're working from home. But what we've found is that if most people do have their camera on, the people that don't have it on then feel obliged to have it on, to turn it on. Or you'll often see that there's a little bit of banter going, oh, you're working at home today, Huey. Like, are you really at home or are you at the beach? Is that why you haven't got your camera turned on? It's a real good culture at NIB where people like to see each other and feel involved.
Sure. So, I don't know if you remember this, but the first time we caught up after our go live date, a month later, and we went through the reports, and what we noticed was a 500% increase in VC usage. How did you achieve that?
Yeah, that was quite amazing. When we sat down with Huey and went through the graphs to make sure everything was working, we saw that we had 2,500 individual VCs in that first month. And previous to that, we were lucky to top out at 500. We dug into that quite deeply just to make sure that the system was working the way it should. And what we found was that now that we enabled our employees and they had the equipment and everything to VC, they started to VC their peers and their colleagues in the different offices. So rather than send an email going, oh, I've got to talk to you about this, I've got to talk to you about that, or even make a phone call, they started doing video conferences one-on-one at their desks. So when we gave them all their end-user compute, we handed out all the appropriate equipment, so all of their headphones, etc., so that they felt obliged. We also put it down to enablement and accessibility. And if you have a really good experience on that first go, then you're really going to get back into it. When we dug into the stats as well, we saw that over 51% of those meetings were from end-user devices. So we started to succeed on people understanding that you don't need to be in a meeting room to have a VC or to join a VC. I know in my team, a lot of the guys don't walk into the rooms. I think they're lazy sometimes. They just join from their desks. I do kind of go, come on guys, a bit of exercise is great. But yeah. I'd like to say that word of mouth is good as well. So if you have a good VC, especially in those startup stages that around the water cooler, then it pushes people to try it as well. Awesome.
How have you seen video drive or add extra business value?
Yes. So in our Australian health business, we have a lot of retail sites around Australia, and they're at your Westfield malls where you can come in and do transact on your account. Previously, when we did strategic updates or all-hands meetings, or the manager of that area wanted to talk to their employees, they had a one-way phone conference. So it was very, uninviting to join, not very engaging. So with the introduction of webinars and Zoom, we're now seeing that they do a lot of their updates via webinars and Zoom meetings, so a mix of both, depending on who's running it and what they're talking about. But it's also opened up that two-way conversation as well. So whether it be via questions, question and answer during the webinar, or preceded questions, we're really starting to see that employees are now feeling empowered to ask these questions. And we even see it when we do our CEO briefings, that people are, previously when you're in a room with a CEO, a lot of the people may not have asked questions, but it's kind of that keyboard courage where they'll just type a question in and push it through, and that will get answered as well. The other thing that was kind of surprised that I didn't think of, or we didn't think of straight away, is the ability to communicate when something unexpected happens. So we had a media incident 6 months or 3 or 4 months ago now that happened on a Friday, and then straight away on the Monday, a webinar was scheduled and pushed out to all employees, and the CEO was able to address this in real time on video and answer questions as well. How that would have worked in the old world would be an email pushed out explaining that no one would have read, and then all the confusion would still be there within the employees, or they'll start to make up their own stories. By having this technology now that we can push through and enable that communication at the spare of the moment, it's really helped us.
So on the same topic of webinars as well, remember recently you did a breakfast event using our webinar platform, and like Zoom as well, you have a partnership with the rugby league team, my beloved Newcastle Knights, who haven't done really well the past couple of years. But tell us a bit more about how you use our webinar platform for this breakfast event.
Yeah, so we sponsor the Newcastle Knights. They're the world's greatest team in 1997 when they won the grand final, and haven't really won anything since. 2001. 2001, sorry. Well, I lost track after that 20-game losing streak. So as part of our sponsorship, we have breakfast events. And how these normally work is that you go to a location and a select few get to join these events. And in this event in particular, we're talking about leadership. So we had the coaches of I think it was the Blues or the Knights, come up and talk about leadership within the team and how they motivate their team members before the big game. If you weren't lucky enough to get selected to attend these events, then you missed out. What we did on this one was we trialled the Zoom technology or webinars to live stream that to all locations so anybody could attend. And the take-up was quite good. We had people sitting at home talking on our internal chat going, "Oh, I'm just having my Weet-Bix now, not quite the good breakfast that you guys are having," but they were still able to listen and participate. So yeah, it's a really good value add there to include people that normally wouldn't be included.
I mean, Eric did promise 2035 there'll be a kind of AI actually having a breakfast.
Oh, look good for my eggs Benny then.
That's right. So what would you say to a manager or leader that's just starting out this journey and looking at remote collaboration?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest a piece of advice I have is to put yourself in the other person's shoes, to understand what challenges they might be having, or what it would be like for them to interact with you the way you're currently interacting. So a good example of this is when we started out with remote teams in my area, I had 12 staff that were based in Newcastle. We were obviously finding it hard to hire talent. So we were looking to hire in different areas. So that brings its challenges. So what we said, we sat down with the team and go, okay, remote team, we're going to have to change the way that we do work. And the best way that we came up from doing it, and wasn't dictated, was let's split the team in two. So we put half the team on level 6 and half the team on level 4. We called it Australia and Switzerland. And then we had to get them to justify if they wanted to come down the stairs and talk to somebody face to face. So if you want to come downstairs, justify me a flight. This pushed the team to use the technology that we had and all of our collaboration tools. And there was a lot of learnings on that. They found that a lot of the information they would pick up around the water cooler that they never got in that 4-week trial period we had. So they had to come up with ways of how to get that that social, I guess that's the social type of interaction happening through collaboration and video. Yeah.
Why'd you pick Australia and Switzerland?
I've always wanted to go to Switzerland. Never been there. I love skiing. Haven't skied in a while. Yeah.
We don't get
Not real.
Snow back home, do we?
No, not real snow anyway.
Awesome. So how do you still maintain culture?
Yeah, well, I think it's quite hard to do with a remote team, especially if you have people working from home a lot or working in different locations. But what we do in my area, so my team's split across Australia, New Zealand, and remote people that work from home. So when we run our quarterly team meetings, I make sure that just because, so normally I would cater in Newcastle, so I make sure that every other location is catered as well, so they feel part of the conversation, part of, they're not on the outer because they're not where my credit card is. We make sure that we book the big rooms so that everyone can sit together. The first time we did this, it was quite confronting. People would still talk to each other, but they wouldn't talk across the video. But yeah, 2 or 3 times after that, we started to see that real engagement and people making that conversation. The other thing we do I've got 3 guys that work in New Zealand and they're the only ops guys over there. So when the other IT teams go out for their social events, I make sure that they're included in their events as well. So they feel part of that bigger community or that one NIB.
Are you traveling less or more now that you have Zoom?
Oh, look, I couldn't hand on heart say that we're traveling less, but I think we're traveling for different reasons now. Part of the uptake that we saw were people that wouldn't normally see their colleagues, and if they did see their colleagues, it would be when they would travel down to Sydney or make a point of travelling down to see them or having those team meetings. So I think we're travelling for different business reasons, building those relationships up front, then maintaining them through the use of technology.
Great. So almost out of time. Before we go to the audience for Q&A, what's next for NIB?
So next on our Zoom journey is Zoom Phone. As part of that, we currently run multiple phone systems across the globe. So it's part of that, providing a simplistic, uniformed experience wherever you are. Look, I can't speak for other areas, but I would like to see our webinars pushed to customers now, especially in our travel insurance business. So, doing travel updates through webinars or a weekly webinar for information on what's going on or good places to go. And then eventually we'll extend it to our front line.
Awesome. Yeah. So hopefully product is around here today. If you had one feature request, what would that be?
Look, I like the virtual background in the Zoom rooms, but this is probably something more that I would like to see is geo-tagged backgrounds that automatically change when you enter a meeting. So if I'm dialing into a meeting in Oakland, I get to see pictures of the Oakland background or different areas of Oakland, or if they're dialing into a Sydney meeting, different areas in Sydney. Because I think that will help drive the conversation and break that ice. So when you're having those meetings and you don't see these people all the time, and you get to see different parts of the world.
Good icebreaker.
Yeah.
Right. Great. Open to the floor. Q&A.
There's a mic rolling around.
I'm right here. Hi.
Hey.
Hello. I just actually have a contribution rather than a question, but one of the ways we at my company foster culture with our remote employees, which make up about a quarter of our employees right now, is we have LAN video game parties. So we all get on and play video games all over the world all at the same time. And we also have a rollout screen for happy hour so that they can see the birthday celebrations, and we send them cupcakes and things like that. And then we do something called side hustles, where employees present something they care about, and we also have the big screen for that, so you can do that in a big meeting room via Zoom. And so people have taught drawing lessons or novel writing lessons and all of their side hustles. And people can do that remotely and watch the presentations locally from remote locations with Zoom rooms, and it's awesome.
Yeah, no, we did fit out in our new building one of the multi-function rooms with VC gear, but we've never actually had remote yoga yet. Still waiting for that invite. I think there was a question over that side.
So once you decided to go down the Zoom path, how did you relay that message back to the end users? Was it an email or was it roadshows?
Yeah.
What path did you take?
Yeah, so change is obviously a key success factor here. We did a lot of road shows going out with the technology, showing them what we did. We stayed away from email because no one reads email, So it was a lot of going to the events, running over 2 or 3 days sessions with all employees, not just our change champions, and then getting them to come in and see the change themselves and taking on their feedback there. Cool. Any Australia questions? No? All right, cool.
One more, I think.
When you were trying to get people to adopt Zoom, where did you find your biggest hurdles? Like, was it just getting them to want to do it, to get them to try it, to get them to get better at it? Like, what was a tough part for you? And then what also surprised you about, oh, I thought that was going to be a lot tougher than it was?
So the toughest part was getting them to give it a go again and restoring faith in the VC platform or in video conferencing. The end users didn't care what brand the other one was, what brand this one was. They just saw it was VC, but it was getting them to maintain trust again and, when they use it, be confident that what they're going to be portrayed as is actually what the values they represent. The biggest surprise was, I don't pigeonhole some types of users, but I called our New Zealand accountant and then she didn't answer, and then straight away she called me back on Zoom, and I'm like, oh wow, I would never expect that. The biggest, there was the people that I had I thought would get the most resistant were the earliest adopters.
So we've got some time for a couple more questions, maybe.
All good then.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing your story with everyone here today and making your way out here. How long was your flight again?
It was a good 20-hour flight in first class economy, so that was great. Look forward to doing it all again tomorrow night.
Great.
So, yeah.
Snoop Dogg tonight.
Yep. Oh, yes, Snoop Dogg. Looking forward to that. I hope everyone's going to attend. It should be a good night.
Great. Well, thank you again, and thank you everyone for coming today.
Yep. Thank you.